Okay, I think we're ready for our last presentation of the day. Again, I said I'm pretty interested in this as a very amateur athlete. I'm a cyclist. I don't know if you all know, but a few years ago, there was a cyclist named Dave Zabriskie, and he was the first athlete to complete the Tour de France as a vegan. So this will be an especially important talk coming up, learning how athletes can perform under plant-based diets. So I want to introduce Matt Ruscigno for our speak.
Thank you. Hey everybody, how's it going? Does everyone want to stand up for a second really quick? Just stand up, shake out a little bit. I'm the last speaker. I hate when people do this to me, but it looks like you need it, no offense. Okay, so a little stretch, do the thing. I like the airplane calf thing I do sometimes, right? So, it's like you don't want to go before lunch, you don't want to go after lunch, you don't want to be at the end of the day, you don't want to be first because no one's there yet, right? So here we are, end of the day. All right, sit down now. Oh, right, yes. Talking about where the most vegetarians are. Let's talk about that at the end for sure. So thank you for having me. It really is an honor. I always feel really fortunate to be here and be able to talk about these things that are important to me and share all of the things that I've learned in my career as a dietitian. And I'd like to start with this, beef or oats. 1 pound of Quaker oats will make as much bone and muscle as 3 pounds of beef. This is from the World's Fair, 1893. I'm not sure if those were random controlled trials that they did or how they came up with that info. But I like to point this out because a lot of this stuff feels new, right? We're talking about a lot of tech protein stuff today that I learned a lot, so thank you. And it feels very new, but it's not really that new, right? How old is the oldest meat alternatives? Do people know? I'm not going to look toward the people I think who do know. 2,000 years. Chinese Buddhists making wheat gluten, as a meat alternative, which is taking the protein from wheat and separating it from the carbohydrate, and you're left with this thing that's not too dissimilar to a soft meat. And 2,000 years ago they were doing this. Rather incredible, and something to think about, and putting this in this larger perspective. So next, Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I'm a dietitian, which is the only professionally regulated term for a nutrition professional. We forget this sometimes, right? Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist. And so the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is our professional organization. And they are not plant-based by any means, but they do put out position papers. And we're fortunate to have this really good one that should be updated next week. I saw an advanced version, wanted to share it, not allowed to do that obviously. And this is important here because it says that appropriately planned vegetarian diets, including vegan diets, are appropriate through the life cycle and including athletes. And it's great to have that because it's gone through the evidence that, what we have so far, we can look at it and say, look, this can be done right. And what does that look like? So nutrition for plant-based eating, this is my own sort of take on this, that nutrients are derived from more diverse foods than the standard American diet, right? It's iron, steak, calcium, milk, right? And that's it. And everyone's like, well, if you're gonna make a meat analog, then it needs to have the exact same amount of iron. But that's not really how plant-based eating works, because we're getting nutrients from more foods more often. And so you're getting smaller amounts, which then can help with absorption. And then it also doesn't limit you. If you can't get dairy milk or whatnot, then you have other sources that you can turn to. Fruits and vegetables are nutrient dense, many nutrients for fewer calories. That's a really important point. We forget this sometimes. And I'm talking about athletes, right? And athletes have obviously much larger caloric needs. I've worked with athletes that are eating 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. Just massive amounts of foods and eating healthy, And they'll be I can only eat so much more brown rice, what do I do, right? And this is where eating more fruits and vegetables really does come in, you know. I had an athlete once say, you know, for a snack I have an apple and a peanut butter packet, and it's just not enough. And I'm like, what about 2 apples? What about 3 apples? You know, that we can eat more of these things, right? We get locked into these, it was joked, it's like diabetes servings, right? Because I feel like so much of how we categorize foods comes from the original categorization for looking at diabetes, for, you know, carbohydrate response and whatnot. But we don't need to be stuck in that way of looking at it. Phytochemicals, non-nutritive benefits, huge, right? This is sort of the future of nutrition, is like looking at all of these benefits. And there could be some benefits for athletes too. So sports nutrition, total calories, got a little bit ahead of myself there. One of the biggest issues I see when people come to work with me, they're just simply not eating enough. And what happens is when people want to eat healthy, right, we make this association of like, oh, plant-based healthy, right? And we saw in the great presentation earlier looking at motivations for eating plant-based. It's a lot of it's health, but we live in a diet culture where people think they need to restrict. You know, like, oh, well, I'm trying to eat healthy, and so I didn't want to eat too much of this quinoa salad, you know, and you're like, no, eat until you're full. It's okay to eat, you know, and so a lot of athletes also can fall into this and just simply not eat enough because they want to stay lean. Deficiency, I don't need to go over that. Sources, carbohydrate, fat, protein, those are the only sources. So carbohydrate, still considered the best energy source. We've sort of the opposite of plant-based eating. We've seen this rise in keto, and then Atkins, and then keto, and then carnivore, and ancestral, whatever you want to call it. The sort of heavy meat, low carb diets that are popular. And I think it's fascinating in that they've looked at sort of fat utilization and for sports, and I think that's interesting. You know, I'd prefer they didn't eat meat, of course, but they are, and they're looking at that. But still, carbohydrates are considered the best source. Sort of this range of recommendations. It depends on a lot of factors, obviously, right? Who you are, you know, your body weight, and the activity that you're doing. But even these low-carb diets recommend some of them 25 to 55% of calories from carbohydrate if you're an athlete, you know? And it's always funny to like kind of go through and see what the carnivore people are saying. And they're like, I'm so strict and I'm totally in ketosis. Well, but I do run, and so I'll make sure that I have some fruit when I'm running. That even the people who are most on the other end of this are saying, well, if you're doing a lot of that, then you do need to have carbohydrates as a calorie source. This is a photo of what I brought with me for a solo 24-hour mountain bike race. And look, it's like mostly carbohydrate, right? No, I didn't eat all of this, but you never know. You just never know. And you have to have variety. You know, when I work with ultra athletes, I'm like, listen, you got to bring stuff that isn't sweet. You're going to be so tired of eating anything sweet. Like, I made the mistake once of, I was preparing for a long race, and I was at Whole Foods, and there was just like chocolate covered everything, and it just sounded good. And then by like, you know, I'm like 15 hours in this race, I'm like, nothing chocolate. I don't want to see anything chocolate. Just like absolutely tired of it, right? So you need variety for this sort of thing. You know, bananas and apples and whatnot when you can, but then also like Ritz crackers, like pretty great fuel source. You get some fat, you get some salt, easy to digest. Not a lot of fiber, which is important. If we don't need to get into those details, I think you know what I'm saying. All right, and then the next is protein. Shoot, I do not have it. Oh, I do have a timer. Great. Wait, was this when I started? Okay. Let me know at 5 minutes. So national protein obsession. Just like still to this day, like protein's just one nutrient. Is it important? Like absolutely, like building blocks of everything, but like absolutely obsessed about protein. And we see it, and like even in our plant-based world, like we have to like look at what consumers think, or what consumers think they know, right? We need to address it, but then in some ways we're like still replicating this like obsession over protein. Regulation, growth of cells, deficiency, we can do this pretty quickly. The RDA, 0.8. So 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And so I'm pointing this out because I'm going to use those numbers in the next couple of slides. So that is just the general recommendation for protein, right? So for every kilogram of body weight, you need 0.8 grams of protein. And that works out to between 10 and 25% of calories. And so the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the practice group, just says, can easily meet protein needs as long as the diet meets energy needs and contain a variety of protein-rich plant foods such as legumes, soy foods, nuts, seeds, and whole grains. It can be this simple. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit more, of course, but it can be this simple looking at variety, right? So how much protein? Whoops, that all came out at once, sorry. International Society of Sports Nutrition, which I kind of lean on for this, they say for most exercising individuals, 1.4 to 2. Again, that's the grams per kilogram of body weight, right? And this is from either 2016 or 2017, I can't remember, because they haven't put out a position paper since. So it should be due, again, hopefully soon. This is an increase from their previous paper, which was 2007, where they said, you know, hey, for athletes, we can just go by this 0.8, and then they're just going to be eating more. And so therefore, the crude amount of protein is going to go up, right? You eat 2,000 calories, you're getting X amount of protein. Now you're working out all the time. It's January 3rd, you're psyched, you know? And you go up to 3,000 calories. You've now increased your protein by 50%. Like, we forget that sometimes, right? We get caught up in these percentages and not look at the actual crude number, right? Like, you know, my athletes that are eating 8,000 calories, like, do they really need to do 1.4 to 2? Probably not. But if you're a bodybuilder who weighs 125 pounds, then you're probably more on the upper end. And then the Academy, so I think the ISSN here, they may increase this. And the direction of the research is really going in, hey, maybe we need a little more protein than we realize. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics has this position paper along with the Canadian Dietetics Group and the American College of Sports Medicine. They go from 1.2 to 2 for metabolic adaptation, repair, remodeling, and protein turnover. So you can see it's this range, right? A lot of factors, depends on what is the activity that you're doing. You know, what is your, where are you compared to your ideal body weight? How long have you been doing it? How adaptive is your body? Are you building new muscle? Are you maintaining the muscle that you do have? There are a ton of factors in looking at how much protein someone needs. And we haven't even gotten into yet the amino acids. So, sorry, there's supposed to be a gray scale. I can see it on my computer here, but unfortunately you're the ones who should be seeing it here, that this really isn't that complicated. This is protein, okay? So legumes is the category. This is the grams of protein in a serving. And so it's a half a cup through lentils, kidney beans, garbanzos, and black beans, okay? So the second line in each row is the number of servings to meet the RDA, okay? And then across here, these are milligrams, and these are the essential amino acids. Okay, don't make me recite each one, all right? I haven't had biochemistry in a while. Now, and you can see that these numbers are different because the amount, there is a recommendation for each specific amino acid. And what I like about this chart, and this is going against what a previous speaker said, but we're gonna look at this from all different angles. None of these are zero. Like, none of these are zero, right? That all of these legumes contain all of the essential amino acids. But the difference is in the amount, right? And you can see, for, this is methionine and leucine is here, and leucine's an important one for athletes, right? We hear a lot about this with dairy and, turning on the protein muscle synthesis. But that requires all of the essential amino acids. And so we can look at the variety here. I always like to talk about lentils, right, as a non-bean legume, right, because legume is a bigger category, beans are under it. that lentils and split peas are very high in protein. And you can see you have some really good numbers here. And then next, now let's look at vegetables, which, we don't think of vegetables as a protein source, right? And I kind of get this like infatuation with protein, because if, you're like, I want to get muscles, and then you look at like animals and they have muscles, and you're like, I'm going to eat that animal, right? It's like, I think really like the thinking is that simple. And, they don't look at a baked potato and be like, yeah, I'm going to get a lot of muscle now, baked potato, right? We just don't think about food that way. And like it's important too in how we like communicate these things, right? And especially as like disinformation is getting worse now. And we can see again that this is the same chart, right? Protein in grams, right? If you were just going to eat baked potatoes, you would need to eat almost 15 to meet the RDA. This is just for like 150-pound male or whatever, annoyingly the standard is. And 15 potatoes, which is a lot. I mean, it's doable. But you could see that you're going to come up short for some of these, Leucine, for example, too, 12.8, that's more servings. But none of these are 0. I don't want to eat 135 carrots for sure. And no one should, right? Like literally turn your skin orange, right? Like it like really happens. I didn't think that was real when I heard it. I'm like, no, that couldn't. It's like, yep, carotenoids, yep, turn your skin orange. That these contain amino acids. Like those amino acids are there. We can talk about digestibility, sure, but when we look at like ideal protein and we look at the protein score of 1, that's based on if you're only eating one food at exactly your caloric needs, perfect protein. Like if you're on an island and like somehow the exact amount of eggs were coming up, like hitting shore, like you're stranded on an island and like the exact amount of box of eggs like shows up, that your exact caloric needs, perfect food, right? If it was peanut butter, not the case. But like fortunately, like none of us are stuck on an island and we eat a variety of foods. And so we have this variety of ways to get the amino acids that we need. And so plant foods contain all the essential amino acids. When I say plant foods, I mean whole plant foods. Oil, obviously, it's been separated and whatnot, but they contain all the essential amino acids. They're there in the like perfect amount if you only eat that food, no, but they're there. So this need to combine proteins is a myth. Our body and our gut can store these amino acids and they're used as needed. It's just fortunate that like rice and beans is delicious, right? And like, we shouldn't be eating one food at a time, but so that's why you have like falafel and a pita. And these things are already being combined, long before anyone knew what an amino acid was. So I think the term incomplete protein is misleading. Like, we tend to not define other foods by what they don't have, Like, is steak like vitamin C deficient steak? No, like you wouldn't say that. You're like, no, you eat other foods to get vitamin C. Well, it's the same thing with protein. You want to eat a variety of foods, right? Legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and more. You've already heard that. And I'm not recommending we eat spinach for protein. But like a cup cooked, someone pointed out, I probably should change this to broccoli, just because that's like 2 bags of spinach to get a cup cooked, right? That's a lot of spinach. It's true. My bad. But you get 5 grams of protein. Hey, it's not 0. Which I think is important, and especially when we're looking at athletes and we're encouraging them to eat like actual real foods, you know what I mean? And people will be like, oh, I don't know if I can eat this. And it's like, bro, you eat like a chicken breast and white rice every single night. Like, you can eat other things. So protein in plant foods, sorry, it's such a boring chart, but tempeh is up high, which is made from soybeans. Seitan, which is just another way of calling wheat gluten, which is that 2,000-year-old meat alternative. Is very high, has a low digestibility though, so we need variety. So you're familiar with these, you don't need to spend too much time on that. But I feel like sometimes that like hyperbolic mass, like I feel like this is such a funny name for a protein powder, like hyperbolic, like is it tongue in cheek, is it not? Like, but we think about protein this way. It's like, and like I know I'm about to get texts like the week between Christmas and New Year's, like, hey man, I'm gonna start working out. What's the best protein powder? It's like, listen, you probably don't need protein powder, no offense, but like just eat food. Like Like humans have been active for a really long time, actually like less active now. And so we can eat the actual food to do this. Not that like protein powder doesn't have a role, but like for most people, they just simply don't need it. So knowing the recs and what's next. This might be a little too in the weeds, but it's important to know what like vegan groups and plant-based groups are doing. Whole food plant-based, how many people are familiar with this term even? Whole food plant-based. Okay, so some of you. It's the sort of, like health movement related to plant-based eating and veganism, but it's different because it says not only no animal products, but no oil, no added salt, no added sugar, no refined flour, no refined rice. And a lot of the like, quote, vegan doctors come from this WFPB movement. They still recommend 0.8. I don't think that's enough. And they say, hey, as long as you're eating enough calories, I've never seen a protein deficiency in my clinic. I'm like, well, it doesn't mean it's ideal. Like, sure, like people aren't gonna die of a protein deficiency, but it doesn't mean they maybe aren't getting enough. As I said earlier, the numbers from those previous papers, that might go up. That range might go up. Vegan world is largely split, much like the general population. I bravely am taking the stance kind of between the two, where I think a lot of, we know people overestimate their physical activity and underestimate their calories. And so it's like something we need to keep in mind when we're working with the public. And most people are gonna underestimate their protein needs because they just have don't understand that foods they're eating that aren't beans or meat or whatever actually do have protein in them. Jahina Malik, vegan since birth. It's funny, sometimes people say, there's like criticism of vegan athletes. It's like, well, you built those muscles back when you were eating meat and you just haven't deteriorated them yet. It's a thing people say. So vegan since birth, pretty cool. Food. I like to, as you're seeing, I like to include pictures of food because when I was a student and we go through all these presentations, I'd be like, I want to see what this looks like. And just an example of like meat alternative, tofu scramble, some potatoes, which have some protein now we learned, whole wheat pancakes made with soy milk. Like I didn't do the calculation, but that's like a good amount of protein for just like a regular breakfast, So sample meal. Whole wheat pasta with broccoli, olive oil, and tomato sauce. It looks like this. So, mostly carbohydrate, 13% protein, and for under 800 calories, you're getting 32 grams of protein. That's pretty good. And 22 grams of fiber, which is like twice the average American gets in a day, in just this one meal. What do I have? 3 cups cooked pasta, a cup and a half of cooked broccoli, a cup of tomato sauce, a tablespoon of olive oil. But what I like to point out here, besides those pretty good numbers on iron and calcium, is that this is without a, quote, protein food, right? And so what happens if we add lentils? And you're like, ooh, lentils on pasta, what are you doing? Well, lentils are just easy to cook. They cook fast, in a rush. You keep them in the fridge. You can just add them to anything, like a lentil bolognese or something, for example, or just like throw them in and the sauce on the pasta when you pop it in the microwave, that works too. And you can up the protein to 41 grams. That's like extra 9 grams of just half a cup of lentils. Like it's easy to manipulate these numbers and that you can just adjust your meal based on your physical activity, your needs, your perceived needs, and that these numbers can vary quite a bit. And and now that we have these like protein pastas and whatnot, you can like really boost those numbers. And so when we're looking at creating plant-based meals, I like this idea of like grains, vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And a lot of the world eats this way, right? And we can look at rice and beans, for example, and we have that all over the world, like rice and tofu, noodles and tofu, falafel I had mentioned, and then things like legumes and nuts and seeds can become sauces. And the athlete that I mentioned had insane caloric needs. I was like, listen, I hope you like peanut butter, because you should make a delicious peanut butter sauce, keep it in the fridge, and pour it over your meals, right? Just to get that extra calories and extra protein, and it's this different way of looking at foods. When I was looking at one of the posters earlier, and we were talking about sort of how a lot of the meat alternatives now are sort of geared toward a Western audience, right? Like a lot of nuggets and burgers and stuff. And I think that's unfortunate, because when I first started eating this way, I leaned on foods from around the world, that are doing a lot of beans already, and different types of beans, and like different ways to combine, grains, vegetables, and legumes. So emphasis on whole foods I still think is important. I don't believe that there's this like total split between like junk food vegan and whole food vegan. Vegan meats can complement. This is controversial. There's a whole aspect of the health world, plant-based world, that says, no, you shouldn't eat meat alternatives because they're processed. And I'm like, why not? Like, I grew up eating these things. I want to continue to eat these things. And I want to eat some of the cultural foods where you only need to swap out the meat for an alternative. And then there you go. You can have these delicious dishes from around the world. Variety, really important. The nonprofit I work with, we've been talking about that 30 plants in a week thing. Has anyone seen this? It's like challenge to get 30 different types of plants in your diet in a week. And I'm like, that sounds so hard. But then when you like think about it, onions and garlic and ginger and herbs and do they count spices? I don't remember. But there's ways to do this and to eat a variety of foods. Fruit and salads can be meals. I remember once, it's like the day after an Ironman race a friend of mine had done, and we were staying with my cousin, and she invited some of my family over, and he was a raw food vegan at the time, and he's in the kitchen, and he's got this big bowl, and he's putting all this stuff, and my cousin says, wow, that's a really big salad. There's only 6 of us. And he said, oh, this is just for me. This is a woman who lives in California and is a flexitarian, she's like not totally unfamiliar with eating a big salad, and it's like, these can be meals, like you need a delicious salad, right? Discretionary calories, as I said, there's not a lot of like research on looking at this, right? But if someone is eating like 10 plus servings of fruits and vegetables and whole foods and whatnot, but they need more calories, like, they can just eat things like vegan ice cream and whatnot, so you do have that benefit. All right, I don't know if this slide is going to be funny to everyone here. I know people don't agree on things, but maybe we can all agree on this. Sriracha nutritional yeast. Do people know what nutritional yeast is? It's this, oh my God, where do you even start with it? It's the worst named product, I think, ever that's existed. But it's a substance, it looks just like that, and it's kind of cheese-like. And it's just building on the great name, grown on a fungus, and is a source of B12. And it's very much like a health food store food, but it's something that people in the plant-based world have really leaned into. Like you can get just like a nutritional yeast cookbook, like an entire cookbook just with nutritional yeast. And it's 50% protein, which is interesting. And then sriracha, which it's from just not far from here, right? Sriracha is like basically a local company. And when I'm feeling lazy, it's like rice and beans, sriracha nutritional yeast, pasta and red sauce, sriracha nutritional yeast, right? And that's okay. That's okay. So I love this. I wish I made it. I think it's brilliant. So wrapping up here, because I want to save some time for questions. Non-nutrients in plant foods, phytochemicals, and antioxidants. So there's some evidence that it reduced inflammatory markers, like the same way that these compounds are beneficial for cardiovascular disease prevention. They may help athletes in recovery. I know that the plural of antidote isn't data, but it is the thing you hear most often from people who make the switch to eating plants more often. They say, oh, my recovery time got way better. And unfortunately, I really dug into the research on this a few years ago, and like almost all of it is based on supplemental phytochemicals. And they didn't find that it was helpful, but I think it's going to be different if you have anthocyanin from blueberries as opposed to in a powder, right? It's probably going to function a little bit differently. So that's something that's interesting. There you go. Nitric oxide, beets, cacao, plant foods, increased vasodilation, oxygen flow to muscles. I think it's so funny. You can buy like beet juice shot, right? And there's some interesting evidence on this helping with athletes, which I find incredible. like a beet. I remember the first time I saw a beet, I was like, what is that dirty, like, look, and it may help athletes. Like, it's pretty incredible. So increased time to exhaustion. This stuff has been tested pretty extensively, and it's shown to have some benefits. Pretty cool. So the benefits of plant foods for athletes: great carbohydrate to protein ratio already. Fruits and vegetables are hydrating, right? It's an important part of this. Some people can only drink so much water. Antioxidants may aid in recovery, as I had said, so that's helpful. Healthy fats for increased caloric needs. It's nice if someone has to eat all these excess calories because of the activity they're doing, that like they can get it from healthy fats. You don't have to eat unhealthy foods to increase your calories. And on the other hand, it doesn't have to be just brown rice and broccoli. Easy to eat, right? Like a banana is like pretty cool. It comes in its own container. It fits in a jersey pocket really nicely. I was really impressed with myself the day I realized I could open a banana with one hand while I was riding and eat it. Right? I'm like, oh wow, look at that! It's like reverse evolution. But they're easy to eat, and many athletes are eating plant foods much of the time. Like, you go to a race, like a trail run, and sure, they might have beef jerky, but they have like potatoes and rice balls and peanut butter and jelly and nuts and seeds. And when people go hiking, they're like, they're like, I need trail mix, I need chocolate, and so like a lot of athletes are like eating this way already. Like it's not that strange of a thing or much of a stretch. So it's something to keep in mind. Right, am I done before my 5-minute warning? All right. Wow, that's maybe a first that I went through fast. So thank you. I'm happy to take questions, criticisms, discussion. Thank you. This is really my bag from the Hollywood Farmers Market.
Is that what you brought on your run?
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I had a question about the protein recommendations. I guess in relation to like kidney health.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there's been a lot of, reservation about increasing the recommended amount of protein because of concerns about the kidneys.
Yeah.
But is there any research that shows a difference between like animal-based protein and plant-based protein on kidneys?
Yeah, this is getting a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but yes. And we saw in an earlier presentation the kidney disease, lower rates of kidney disease among vegetarians and vegans, and that could be due to the type of protein that they are eating. This idea, the whole food plant-based world loves to say, oh, if you eat too much protein, it's just bad for your kidneys. And my understanding of the research, and someone please correct me if I'm wrong, is that's a lot of protein, like 3 grams per kilogram body weight, in order to hit like potential kidney damaging amounts. But my understanding is also that that isn't totally settled. So.
One thing about that, I just recently, Dr. Michael Greger had brought that up, and if you eat more than like 1.5, I think it was, I can't remember the number, but he did at nutritionfacts.org bring it up that if you eat more than kind of this level, and it was under 2, that then you are increasing inflammatory markers. So that's a place to look. My question was actually, I was reading a book by Dr. Andrew Weil, which he does meat and everything, but they were saying that if you have an excess of omega-3s, it's pro-inflammatory, which just seemed counterintuitive, and I have seen a few talks where, like they were saying you have to kind of have your minimum ratio omega-6 to omega-3 should be 4:1. Of course, the standard American diet, you have a lot more than that. Have you seen any data regarding?
I haven't seen that, and with omega-3, and I'd be careful with that because vegans and vegetarians need to think about making sure they get enough omega-3. And regarding Gregor, like, he's a heavyweight in my world, and I actually watched all his videos about protein before this talk, and I disagree with him. But I haven't sold 100,000 books. Wait, I don't mean that as a diss. Sorry, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that he's very popular. I'm not saying I agree with him on most things, but I just think he's not quite there on the protein.
Hi. How do you feel about the fact that it's only going to get increasingly worse for us to be able to provide solid nutritional information to people when they always get their nutrition information from TikTok?
I know. I hate it.
I do too. That's why I'm asking you. I'm asking you, how do we stop it, Matt? How do we create the resistance to show people that actually there's a better way?
Yeah, man. God, if I had an answer, I'd be in front of 10,000 people. It's really difficult. I think someone earlier was saying just like sticking with the principles, and like facts don't always work, and they like often don't work, right? But reaching people where they are, because I address a lot of this stuff in my world. I'm often correcting, like vegan influencer people. I'm like, hey, I hate to send you this message, but actually spinach is not a good source of calcium, because I think that is important to, correct people and whatnot. And I think part of this too, that I meant to say this in the beginning, like, a lot of people who eat this way are motivated, like, not just for health. And so they're looking for that information, because they want to do the right thing, not necessarily that it's the best thing, but they're like, I don't want to eat animals. I need to know how to do this correctly. And so in a lot of ways, that's influenced my career, because the people who come to me are smart and want to do what's best in a certain way. Do you know what I mean? They're not just saying, like, what is the ideal diet, right? Because we don't really have that, And so I think it's important to sort of, like, lean into those, like, subcultures and cultures, and the people. You can only do so much, but if you can influence the people around you, and, like, become trustworthy in your world, that can help, shape at least a tiny, tiny bit of the world. And while he crosses the room, there's a discussion earlier, and I agree that over here that Germany has the most vegetarians in the Western world. Someone had said that was incorrect, but nearly 10% of people in Germany. I think, did you say the Netherlands? They have a lot of flexitarian. Plant-based, sure, yeah. Yeah. Right. And you may have a country where more people are eating that, but they also eat meat. But in Germany, yeah, you're both right. Next.
I'm wondering, you mentioned several different vegetables as examples, etc. And then you also mentioned a consumption of healthy fats. So when you are talking to the athletes, etc., do you recommend avocados, or how do avocados play a role in a plant-based diet for athletes?
Yeah, and I live in Southern California. Like, we have such good avocados. I definitely do recommend them, but when I go visit my family in New York and I get an avocado and I go, oh man, now I feel kind of bad recommending this because they're so much better here. But I do, here in New Mexico, and I do recommend them because they are a concentrated source of calories and healthy calories, and easy to use. Make a dressing, make a sauce, that sort of thing, because of those healthy fats.
Thank you, Matt. That was excellent. Really great. Nice compliment of some of the nutrition and the food science information we had today. That's why we want Matt to kind of bring it back to, okay, what do we tell the consumer? And I want to follow up on that hybrid component because Matt brought up a great suggestion of adding lentils to the pasta. That it goes to that hybrid thinking. I mean, something in the nutrition world we've been recommending for a long time is adding lentils to your meat bolognese, or slowly, adding in these foods. It's something that people don't even know is in there if you sneak in those lentils.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I used to
great
work with
tip.
kids a lot.
Yeah.
And the parents would come to me, and I learned all the tips from them. They're like, I cook the broccoli and carrots, and I blend it, and I add it to the sauce. They don't even know it's there.
Right.
Like tips like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you again. And folks, we have one final thing to wrap you up today. So I will pull up our final information. I'm going to ask Dr. Singh to come up and just speak with us. He is one of our, what we would like to do is make sure that everybody knows why this was possible today. And unfortunately, Mr. Bipin Shaw was not able to be here today. He was traveling, but we were able to get a recording so that he could share some information with us about what he has made possible. And Dr. Singh will share some information about Mr. Shah before I hit play.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, all the presenters. It was wonderful. I think everybody learned a lot of things. Let's give a hand applause for everybody. Thank you, thank you. Yes, and thank you all the faculty and Bilal for Colleen and Fatima for organizing this again for the first session. How it was possible, just briefly, before pandemic, I am a vegetarian, so I was thinking about that I had issues with finding vegetarian food when I was traveling. So cooking is one of the problem that we don't know how to cook lentils. We don't cook here but my mom used to cook every day, so I was used to that. I could not find it here. So I thought we held a Indian healthy food competition at Cal Poly Pomona like 7-8 years ago, before the pandemic. It was very, very successful. People learned a lot of things. And then it triggered this discussion with various donors about various directions we could go. And then we ended up with Mr. Shah. At one point, he was part of the Ahimsa Center over here in Cal Poly Pomona. And I met with him over here in Kalok, actually this hall upstairs. And we had discussions going on and on and on for like 1.5 or 2 years almost, before we finalized that we want to open a minor. And then we discussed before about in the panel that how we started. And then we also got his approval. He gave funding to host a lecture series, distinguished lecture series on plant-based food. We had several on Zoom, as Colleen mentioned before. Colleen was basically the host of those from the beginning of these seminars online, Zoom. We have recordings of those available on our college website. John Hopkins, Dr. Sabate from Loma Linda. We had several dietitians, industry, people from industry, from food science. So we had several, so you can check it out if you want. YouTube videos are available. But that was how we started. And then, because I think he is going to talk about this, but Mr. Shah belongs to a Jain community, which is kind of at the same time as Buddhism. So he belongs to that community from India, and they are purely plant-based, not vegetarian, plant-based. They don't even, some of these sections, they don't even eat garlic or some other things because they are underground, or there are other reasons for that. So they don't eat those also, but a rate of cancer is very, very low in those communities have been studied. At least that's what the claim is. So one of the reasons why he supported this was he wanted to promote the plant-based eating, and as you know, it was also getting a trend in US at that time. So we got that funding, and we were able to host a lot of seminars, and then we got the plant-based faculty member, Bilal, and then we are here today for, all of that ended up being here today. So let's listen to him, his thoughts about it. It's very important. I hope you will be able to take the final thoughts with that today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. I'm going to turn this off so we all hear well.
Morning, everybody. My name is Bipin Shah, and I currently am in the technology field, and I have been in technology for several decades. So I'm not a food related person or a food scientist. So don't expect much details from me on that front. So the agenda for today's presentation is as follows. So how it all gets started, and I'm specifically talking about Cal Poly. And then between Professor Singh and I, what did we decide to do? What was my vision for this plant-based food program? And then what process that we went through, and a very brief, indication of the outcome. So with that, let me go to the main slide. Oh, no. Okay, so by the way, Professor Singh and I knew each other before we even started talking about this program, because I've been involved with Cal Poly since the early 2000, when I initially sponsored, so I was one of the sponsors of what's called Ahimsa Center, which is the Center of Nonviolence, started by a professor of history, Dr. Tarasetia. And so one day I got a call from Professor saying, hey, can we do something about a vegetarian food stall at the annual Cal Poly event? That's, I think they call it Wine Festival and fundraising event. And after some thinking, being from the Bay Area and all the logistics, etc., I said, I don't think I can participate, but maybe my daughter can. So after all the dialogue that we had, we decided that, hey, we want to do something more perpetual than participating just in the fair as a one-time event. So we carried on the idea and discussion for several months. And I want to do something more permanent at Cal Poly. So we had dialogue with the dean and development people, etc., and we decided that we have to create a minor in plant-based food and develop the plants for it. So a budget was to be defined, etc., and agreed to fund it. So under Professor Eden, we spent a semester defining the program, and it was later on sent to the Senate, Academic Senate for approval, took a year to get it approved, etc. So what was my vision for this program? So there are three major reasons. One is, plant-based food is good for health. It's not just a talk anymore. It's been medically accepted that it is good for health, and particularly heart health. And many years ago, a book was published by Dr. Dean Ornish of the Bay Area, the title of which I think was Reversing Heart Disease. And then many physicians, including cardiologists, became believers that, yeah, there is definitely evidence of that. The second reason is environmental. So in producing meat, there are lots of resources used. Some methane gas is produced, which is bad for the environment, and so on. And the third reason, I guess I'm not, is humanitarian. So Rekha and I are Jains, and so Jainism believes in, very high level of nonviolence or ahimsa, and, to have millions of animals that lose their lives for human food consumption is a concept that's not very friendly to Jainism. So our goal is to enhance the consumption of plant-based food and save as many animal lives as we can. And ethically and environmentally, we thought this is the right thing to do. So that's really the crux of what we wanted to do. And the process, I went through it briefly. So during the process, Professor Singh and David Eden at the time, who was a chef, by the way, by background before he got his PhD, determined that 5 more classes and roughly 8 units are needed as new courses to be developed for this minor, and taking other courses from other departments to complete the required credit. And the program was launched in 2020, fall of 2020. And as of now, what has been the outcome? About 12 total food tech plant-based food tech minor graduates will graduate in the class next year. This is a preliminary number. The current enrollment in the program is about 22 students. And we have had some history of graduates getting out of Cal Poly in the past years. And they are being employed by food technology or food products company to develop new plant-based products. And many of them who graduate with nutrition focus, including plant-based food minor, are good for providing advice to companies and institutions and individuals on plant-based nutrition. So with that, I'm concluding my presentation. So thank you very much. I know time is short. So Rekha and I would like to thank you for your attention. And I'm leaving town today to go overseas. Otherwise, I would have loved to join the meeting there in person. So Bilal, thank you for.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Shah. I mean, you was one of the earliest funders of this program. And I know we're all rushing, but no point. We're already stuck in LA traffic jam, so I'll read it. I'll take a minute. So we almost come to the end, or we are at the end of our first day of the event. I hope that everyone learned something new or some knowledge that you will apply in your research or your life. I would like to really extend our deepest thanks to Dean Baskey for the financial support that she made for this symposium, making it accessible for the students. She subsidized the registration fees, which was amazing, even for us, and believe it or not, yes, we paid to be here. So thank you so much, Dean Baskey. I would like to extend my appreciation to the scientific committee, Julie, Bonnie, Ishwar, and Isam, and the theme committee, Emily, Fatima, and Sangeeta. Thank you so much for your valuable inputs. I would like to thank the Dean's Office employee, Dan Lee, Jane, Rebecca, and Winnie Lau. I would also like to thank our students, especially the graduate students. I call them the Batmen and Batwomen because behind the scene, most of the work was done by them. And in the future, if you're looking for employees, those are the potential candidates. I would like to express my appreciation to the distinguished speakers. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your knowledge with us. And of course, I would not forget about the sponsors. Thank you so much for your contributions. And I think we presented that we are here for the community. We will produce talent that will support you back in food industry. Thank you so much again for sponsoring the event. And lastly, I would like to thank our ASC, our department administrator, Jesslyn. I think most of you, especially those who paid money or sponsored, they know Jesslyn. She really did an outstanding effort and a lot of hours behind this event. And We have something small for her. I'm not sure if she is here. Yes, she is here. Thank you so much, Jesslyn. Just on time. Yes, just on time. So we have something small for you, and thank you so much for all the efforts that you invested in the event. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow, 7:30. We have another good breakfast. Thank you so much. Have a good night.